Welcome back. So far tonight, we've outlined how the church currently works, the boxes down your left-hand column, and I've suggested 4 movements to a new image of what church could be like, the boxes in the right-hand column. So our final question is, well, so what? What should we do about it? And the context of each of our congregations is so different that it would not be for me to try to suggest what you should do locally. But I do want to suggest some rules of art that might paint a broad brushstrokes picture of what we could do. Firstly, and most importantly, we need to shift our mindset from age segregated to intergenerational. We need to remind ourselves that age segregation is a very recent phenomenon in the life of the church, and that there are more benefits to all ages of moving back to a more intergenerational way of being. To do that, we need to make intergenerational the default position in church life. Our starting point for everything we do needs to become, how can we involve all ages in this? In ecumenical work, there's a statement called the Lund Principle that suggests we should only do apart those things which we can't in good conscience do together. And I'm suggesting we adopt an intergenerational equivalent. We should do everything intergenerationally unless there's a very good reason not to. For example, an age limit placed on being a charity trustee. As an example of this, I'd like to think of our practice of Holy Communion. Because we age segregate, the majority of children in our church miss out on taking part in the family meal. Only around 6% of children in the Church of Scotland currently receive communion, and yet we wonder why they don't stick around. If we adopt an intergenerational mindset, then all will have a place at the table. All can experience the presence of the living God, and the body of Christ is made more complete. Another consequence of this change in mindset is that it might be time to bid farewell to the Sunday school as we know it. And certainly we must stop removing children from worship and sending them out somewhere else. There are churches who now hold learning or discipleship groups for all ages, a whole family Sunday school where everyone can learn together and from one another. And in an age where not only children, but their parents and often their grandparents have never had a church connection, such intergenerational groups can make space for multiple generations of a family to explore faith at the same time. Then on to our second movement and our second rule of art. I mentioned earlier that in most churches, worship is split into a time for children and a time for adults. But have you ever noticed that most of the adults seem to enjoy the children's address more than the rest of the service? That's usually because it incorporates elements of different styles that other parts of the service might not. So in order to move to a more experiential way of being, where congregations expect to experience an encounter with the living God, I'm suggesting we make the whole of worship more like that first bit, thus doing away with the need for a children's address altogether. David Sinos, a Canadian researcher, identified 4 styles of spirituality in which different people connect to God. He calls the first one word, and that refers to those who focus on their intellectual thinking of God, those who connect with God through stories, sermons, the words of hymns, prayers, Bible studies, discussion groups, and so on. The second style is emotion, which refers to those who connect with God through feelings. For example, dance, drama, responding to music by clapping or raising hands. Symbol is the third style, and that refers to a more mystical spirituality, where people connect with the transcendent God through images, icons, nature, lighting candles, reflecting in silence, that sort of thing. And the fourth is action, which refers to those who need to do more than just pray for the world, those who meet God by doing God's work and championing social justice. If these are the 4 styles in which we connect with God, they apply to all of us. Although evidence suggests that children tend to have just one style that is a very strong preference, whereas adults might have one that's dominant, but we're a bit more of a mixture of all of them. An element of worship which works for a symbol adult will also work for a symbol child, and so on. So we can therefore lose the mentality that certain types of activities or songs or stories or parts of the service are for one age group or another. There are just as many adults love colouring in as there are children who hate it. Our worship in the Church of Scotland is very, very heavy on word. If we intentionally incorporated the other 3 styles into our worship, we could ensure that everyone can participate in worship and experience God together, regardless of age. Perhaps instead of speaking about all age worship, we need to begin thinking about all styles worship. Let's turn again to consider place sharing. And this time I'm going to link it to our 3rd rule of art, which is to reimagine education as formation through experiencing the living Christ in place sharing relationships. There are 3 ways that we could characterize most learning. The most obvious is formal learning, which is traditional and intentional. Someone sets out with the intention of teaching us something. School is formal learning. So is Sunday school or Bible class. The second is non-formal learning, which is still intentional, but is much more practical. An apprenticeship would be an example of non-formal learning. And Jesus actually seemed to teach the disciples in non-formal ways. But the 3rd element of learning is also practical, but is also deeply traditional, is not intentional. It's called socialization. And that's where learning takes place unintentionally. For example, we learn to speak our mother tongue through socialization. No one sat us down one day and said, "I'm now going to teach you English." We learn our table manners through socialization, through experiencing it and watching others do it. Now, the Church of Scotland has invested all of its stock in formal learning. But I'd like to suggest that we need to also invest in one another's lives through place-sharing relationships in order to revive the other 2 models. Non-formal learning can take place in a sort of mentoring relationship where an older person could offer a child their wisdom, while the child can offer that older person a freshness of faith or perhaps some technical expertise. And by sharing our whole faith life intergenerationally, we learn from one another by socialization. We learn about God present with us because we see one another in worship. Here's an example of what that could look like. When a middle schooler sees that a young adult is genuinely learning and growing in his faith, this provides a powerful witness to the young adolescent. Similarly, when a middle-aged adult sees a youngster have an aha moment of faith, it freshens and enlivens the faith of the mature adult. When the whole community learns the same things at the same time, it strengthens the sacred nature of the whole community. Place sharing requires a depth of relationship, and that's something that we can't force. Some people will click with, others we just won't. And it's really important to say that one person, be they a minister, elder, or other, cannot possibly be in a place-sharing relationship with the whole congregation. Rather, the job of leaders is to curate place-sharing relationships. to be like spiritual matchmakers that look to connect people in our congregations with others who share an interest or experience, to make sure no one is left out. Two things that I believe can help us to do that are sharing stories and hospitality. I work in a local ecumenical partnership involving the Methodist Church. And one thing Methodists value far more than Presbyterians is testimony, sharing our stories with one another. In creating space in worship or fellowship for people to share their story, it opens them up to new relationships with others who can identify with them, and it paves the way for place sharing to happen. The other key practice is hospitality. And I'm not talking about your bourbon cream and over-diluted orange juice, but genuine hospitality offered as what Nouwen called a free and friendly space of welcome. Nouwen says hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. And that's what place sharing involves. One of the simplest things that different generations could do together is cook, serve, and eat with one another. And the conversations that happen over food are where those lifelong relationships are formed. Relationships in which the living Christ is revealed. So there's my vision of how we can achieve a viable intergenerational church community. Make intergenerational the default position in church life. Do everything we possibly can with all ages together. This probably means an end to Sunday schools as we know them, and certainly means changing to include everyone in the Lord's Supper. Then incorporate all spiritual styles in our worship to enable people to experience the living Christ together. Our services need to be less wordy and offer people the chance to interact with others of different generations in a variety of styles. We need to reimagine education as formation through experiencing the living Christ by creating space for mutual place-sharing relationships where informal learning, such as mentoring, and learning by socialization can take place. And finally, church leaders need to become holy matchmakers, curating place-sharing relationships within their congregation, reviving ancient practices such as testimony and hospitality. So we're going to go back into our groups one final time, and perhaps you could discuss how you might be able to act on some of that in your own local context. What one change could you make towards becoming a more intergenerational church? Thank you for sticking with us to the end and for sharing with one another. I want to just stop and pause for one final thought. And that's, over the last 8 months, we have had to reimagine what it means to be church. We've taken most of what we do online. And we've discovered that suddenly mum or dad or gran is there and involved in Sunday school or Girls' Brigade. We've found a space online where families can worship together. Instead of holiday clubs for children, we've produced and posted out materials for whole households to engage in, regardless of age. This is a fulcrum moment for the church. We can either, when COVID is over, pivot back to what we were once before and continue a cycle of decline, or we can take what we've learned during lockdown and return to our ancient ways of being together, all ages with and for one another. I hope that after tonight, you'll begin to reimagine how the whole of church life could be different if we bring the generations back together again. Imagine reshaping your church so that the focal point of congregational life was a place of hospitality. For example, could you have regular and frequent shared meals where all ages are involved in preparation, service, and sharing together? And as food is shared, so are stories. and deep place-sharing relationships emerge. Christian formation takes place as all ages experience the living Christ present among them. And that place of hospitality is also missional, as you extend an invitation to others to come and join the table and share with you. In that same spirit of hospitality, imagine worship has become a space for all, with all spiritual styles included, and opportunities for all ages to praise, pray, learn, and share their stories together. I began tonight by presenting the stark statistics about the diminishing number of children in the Church of Scotland. But I want to finish by being optimistic. If each congregation can paint its own picture of how they might become a vibrant, hospitable, intergenerational family, the Church will be well placed to extend an invitation to all to take their place at the table.